The first night at Lake Chelan felt like stepping into a different world, one carved from mist and shadow. My name is Marcus Holloway. I'm 32, and I've always thought of myself as the kind of person who could handle the solitude that comes with sleeping by the water's edge in a VW camper. The air smelled sharp with pine and damp earth, a scent that should have been comforting, grounding even, but it carried a chill I couldn't shake, like a warning whispered just beneath the hum of the wind. I had parked my camper on a narrow stretch of shore, where the trees leaned over the water as if to watch, and the lake lay flat and black, swallowing every ripple, every reflected star. My plan was simple: unwind, fish, and let the silence cleanse me after months of city noise, deadlines, and endless obligations. But even as I set out my small lantern and prepared the campsite, something about the quiet made my stomach tighten. It wasn't emptiness, it was expectancy. I hadn't been alone on the lake for more than 10 minutes when I noticed him, or at least what I assumed was a him, a lone fisherman, hunched over a skiff that bobbed unnaturally near the center of the water, dark against the moonlight. He wasn't waving, calling out, or doing anything I could see beyond sitting perfectly still as though he were part of the lake itself. At first, I thought it was a trick of the moon's reflection, maybe a log or some floating debris, but then the shape shifted slightly when I flicked my lantern toward it. I told myself not to overthink it. The locals had warned me that Lake Chelan's waters are deceptive. Objects appear closer than they are, and the trees along the shore can play cruel tricks on your eyes. Still, a thread of unease wormed its way under my ribs. Night settled faster than I expected, the temperature dropping sharply. My camper's walls shivered with the wind, and the sound of the lake became more than water against rock. It was a low, constant murmur, like the whisper of 1,000 small voices brushing against each other. I tried to drown it with the clink of my fishing line, the rhythmic tug of the reel, anything to anchor myself in something familiar. But the figure didn't move, even when I approached the shore. It remained suspended in that impossible stillness, a shadow etched in the silver gray of moonlight. My rational mind shouted at me to call it in, report it to someone, but my instincts, sharpened by years of solitary camping, told me to observe quietly. Fear mingled with curiosity, a dangerous cocktail that made my heart hammer and my palms sweat. Hours passed and I caught nothing. The lake offered silence instead of fish, a sense of presence instead of peace. Around midnight, the wind shifted and brought with it a smell I can't forget, brine and something iron-rich like wet rust or blood carried on a current. I froze, mid-reel, listening. The figure had moved, or perhaps it had been closer all along. The water lapped against the rocks in a rhythm that matched my pulse, and every instinct screamed that I was being watched. I returned to the camper to grab my flashlight, and that's when I heard the sound for the first time. A single, soft splash, deliberate, measured from somewhere just beyond the edge of the shore. Not a fish jumping, not the wind, something larger, something alive. I swallowed hard and shined the flashlight into the darkness, its beam trembling along the edge of the water. Nothing. Only the lake and its silvered surface, smooth and unbroken, reflecting the skeletal outlines of the trees. And yet, I could feel it. Someone, something, moving beneath that surface, tracing the line of my campsite like a predator sizing up its prey. The rational part of me wanted to dismiss it, chalk it up to imagination heightened by isolation. But another part, the part that had learned to respect nature's hidden threats, whispered that denial here was dangerous. I climbed back into my camper, shutting the door carefully, the metal latch clanging louder than expected. I tried to sleep, but the whisper of the water against rock, the splash that returned every few minutes, and the unsettling sensation that I was being studied kept me awake. I lay there in the darkness, imagining the fisherman's eyes catching mine across the water, unblinking, eternal. Morning brought some relief, but not peace. The sun rose pale and hesitant, brushing the lake in cold light, and the figure was gone. Yet something had changed in the air. The wind carried an edge now, and the surface of the lake looked almost oily, darker than it had at night. I broke camp with a sense of urgency, the feeling that I'd overstayed my welcome pressing against my shoulders. As I packed, I noticed my fishing gear was coated in a thin layer of mud I didn't remember being there, streaked in a pattern that looked almost deliberate, like claw marks or scratches tracing a path. I shook it off, telling myself it was nothing. But even as I drove away, the trees leaning over the lake seemed to tilt toward me, as if to warn me not to look back. And when I did glance over my shoulder, I thought I saw a dark figure, the skiff gone but the shape unmistakable, standing on the water's edge, motionless, watching. That day, I drove through the winding roads surrounding Lake Chelan, the quiet stretching long between bends and curves. I met a few locals, fishermen, hikers, RV travelers, asking about the lake, about the presence I had felt. They smiled politely, exchanged stories of storms and wildlife, but when I asked specifically about lone figures on the water, their faces hardened, their eyes shifting just slightly. One man, an older angler named Harold, muttered something under his breath about the silent fisherman and shook his head. I pressed, asking for clarification, and he finally said, voice low and wary, "Some nights the lake takes its own. Some things you see, they're not meant for visitors. He doesn't move, doesn't speak, but he watches. And those who meet him, sometimes they don't leave the same." I tried to rationalize it like any person would. Folklore and local superstition, surely. But my gut, that primal sense I've honed from years of camping and solo survival, told me otherwise. The unease that had lodged in my chest the night before had burrowed deeper, becoming something heavier, more insistent. By the time I returned to the edge of the lake that evening, despite telling myself I wouldn't, I understood why Harold had said nothing more. The lake felt alive in a way that made my skin crawl, like it was breathing slowly beneath me, waiting. My camper rolled to a stop near the same cove, the water calm, the surface glassy, and I caught sight of something at once terrifying and mesmerizing, a lone figure at the water's center, exactly as I remembered, sitting in perfect stillness, facing my direction, though somehow impossibly far away. My throat tightened. I felt that chill again, the one that grips you when instinct and logic collide, telling you that the world as you know it has just been displaced. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears as I stepped closer to the shoreline, my flashlight slicing through the darkness in uncertain arcs. The figure hadn't moved. It didn't need to. Even from this distance, the stillness was unnatural, almost deliberate, like a shadow planted in the world to test my nerves. I told myself to breathe, to slow down, to remind myself that I'd spent decades alone in the wild and that fear was just another layer of the forest's noise. But this was different. There was intelligence here, and it wasn't friendly. I knelt on the wet rocks, shining the light directly at the skiff, but there was nothing but a dark outline, a silhouette too perfect to be random. Then, without warning, the water around it rippled, spreading outward in concentric circles like the lake itself had exhaled. My stomach dropped. I had been so careful, so confident in my isolation, and now I realized how fragile that sense of control really was. The night deepened around me, pressing closer with every rustle of leaves, every whisper of wind. My flashlight caught glimpses of movement in the trees, branches that bent like fingers, shadows that weren't shadows, and I had the distinct impression that the forest was aware of me, aware that I was intruding. The figure on the water remained utterly motionless, yet I felt its gaze slicing through the darkness, tracking every step, every breath. I wanted to turn and run, but my legs wouldn't obey. It's a strange paralysis, the kind that grips you when the mind knows there's danger but the body refuses to move. All I could do was watch as the skiff shifted slightly, just enough to catch the reflection of the moon on something metallic. My pulse thudded like a drum in my chest, each beat echoing the silent warning that had begun the moment I arrived. Hours seemed to stretch like days. I tried calling out, first softly, then louder, my voice swallowed by the vast black of the lake. "Hey, is someone there?" My words echoed, bouncing back distorted over the water, and for a moment I thought I heard a faint reply, like a whisper too far away to understand. The trees groaned around me, the wind snatching the sound away, leaving only that oppressive silence. Then I heard the splash again, deliberate, measured, closer this time. I jumped back instinctively, flashlight swinging, and that's when I saw it. A figure emerging from the water near the shore. It wasn't running, wasn't even walking, but gliding, moving with a liquid grace that defied comprehension. My mouth went dry. Every rational explanation, the currents, the logs, the tricks of light, crumbled under the undeniable reality of what I was seeing. Something was coming for me. I stumbled backward, almost falling into the shallow edge of the lake, my mind screaming for me to move faster, to get to the camper, to escape. But the water at my feet was icy, sucking the warmth from my body, and the figure paused, tilting its head in that unnerving, impossible way. Its eyes, though I can barely describe them, were blacker than the lake, yet reflective, like molten glass, catching every glint of my flashlight. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. Its presence alone was a sentence, a warning, and a challenge wrapped into one. I could feel a coldness emanating from it, spreading across the ground, curling around my legs, climbing my spine. Panic seized me, and with a final, desperate lunge, I scrambled back toward the camper, heart hammering, lungs on fire. Inside, I slammed the door, locking it with hands that shook uncontrollably. I sat on the edge of the small bed, flashlight trembling in my grip, listening to the sound of water lapping against the hull, now mixed with a faint, irregular tapping, like fingernails drumming against the side of the camper. I wanted to convince myself it was the wind, the trees, a branch brushing the metal. But deep down, I knew better. The figure had followed me, had somehow closed the distance despite my barricade, despite the safety of walls I thought would protect me. I spent the night staring into the blackness beyond the windows, flashlight held high, until exhaustion finally dragged me into a fitful, shallow sleep, haunted by dreams of water pulling me under and the fisherman's silent eyes staring from below. Morning brought light that felt fragile, pale, as if the lake itself resented the intrusion of the sun. I stepped outside cautiously, scanning the water with every sense alert. There was no skiff. There was no figure. Just the lake, calm and empty, reflecting the gray sky in perfect, deceptive stillness. Yet the mud-streaked fishing gear from the night before had shifted. Lines tangled, hooks bent, the faint imprint of something scraping along the wooden surfaces. I packed quickly, refusing to linger, refusing to give the lake any more of my time. Driving away, I could feel the lingering presence, the memory of black eyes, the weight of something unseen but profoundly aware. Even miles from the shore, I couldn't shake the sensation that I was being followed, that the lake had marked me, and that one day I might return to find the silent fisherman waiting exactly where he belonged, in the abyss. Weeks later, I couldn't forget. I found myself poring over local histories, reading accounts of disappearances, missing campers, and fishermen who vanished without a trace. Each story ended the same way, unexplained, unsolved, with only the lake itself as witness. I realized then that the fear I had felt wasn't irrational. Lake Chelan wasn't just a place, it was a presence, a living, patient entity, and the silent fisherman was its sentinel, watching, waiting, and reminding anyone who dared enter that solitude comes with a price. Every time I close my eyes, I see him still, silhouette against the black water, the reflection of the moon in eyes that never blink. I've learned to respect the silence now, to listen to the lake's subtle warnings, and to leave before curiosity transforms into obsession. Some lessons I've discovered are carved not in words but in fear, and in the case of Lake Chelan, they are carved deep. The next night, despite every rational thought screaming at me to stay away, I found myself drawn back to the lake. Call it curiosity or a compulsion I couldn't explain, a need to see with my own eyes, to understand what had stared back at me. My name is now Evelyn Carter, 35, and I've been camping in the Pacific Northwest for nearly a decade, always chasing solitude, always seeking the quiet that so few people understand. But Lake Chelan isn't quiet. Not really. That night, the fog lay thick across the water, crawling between the trees like a living thing, and the surface of the lake was a black mirror reflecting nothing and everything at once. I parked the camper near the same cove, my pulse quickening, the scent of damp pine and cold water thick in the air. I tried to focus on practicalities, setting up my line, preparing a small meal, but every rustle of leaves, every distant splash reminded me that I was not alone. It didn't take long before I saw him. The skiff floated in the same place as before, the figure seated, motionless. The moon caught his outline, reflecting a pale, almost metallic glint from the water around him. I held my breath, frozen in place. Unlike before, I didn't approach. Instead, I studied, observing the pattern of ripples, the way he sat perfectly still, how the water seemed to respond to him. Then came a subtle movement, a single hand lifting slightly above the surface, then lowering again, as though testing the boundary between himself and the shore. My stomach tightened. Fear washed over me, but it was mixed with a strange fascination. The way the figure existed, suspended between worlds, human but not human, a sentinel of the lake. Hours passed, marked only by the occasional splash, each one deliberate, each one echoing like a heartbeat. I tried to tell myself stories. Perhaps a local recluse, a fisherman who refused to leave, maybe even a hallucination fed by my own mind. But the air carried something else, something that pressed on the skin and sank into the bones. Expectation. He was waiting, patient, and aware of every tiny movement I made. I could feel the pull of the water beneath him, the slow shift of the skiff as if it were alive, and I realized that the lake itself was a partner in his presence, moving with a purpose I could not begin to comprehend. As midnight approached, a dense fog rolled in from the far side of the lake, curling around the trees and obscuring the shoreline. My flashlight barely cut through it, and I realized that I couldn't even see the edge of the water anymore. The figure remained visible, a dark silhouette in the middle of a gray void. Then came the sound. The softest, most deliberate splash, followed by another, and then another, approaching steadily. My mind screamed at me to retreat, to start the engine and drive away, but my body felt rooted. And then I saw it. The figure was closer, gliding across the water with impossible speed, moving silently as the fog wrapped around him like a cloak. Panic surged through me. I fumbled for the keys, my hands trembling so violently that the metal felt foreign in my grip. The skiff reached the shoreline in a single fluid motion, and the water around it churned unnaturally, like the lake itself had risen to greet him. He stopped just a few feet away, water dripping from his form, dark and glistening in the flashlight's beam. I could see now that he wasn't just human, not entirely. The eyes, black, reflective, infinite, locked onto mine, and a shiver ran down my spine that wasn't just cold. I wanted to speak, to ask who he was, what he wanted, but no words came. Time stretched, every second expanding with unbearable weight. Then, just as suddenly as he arrived, the figure dipped back into the lake, sinking into the black mirror with the same impossible grace, leaving only ripples where he had been. My legs moved almost of their own accord as I stumbled into the camper, heart hammering, vision blurred with tears and disbelief. I started the engine and drove, not daring to look back, until the trees no longer leaned toward me, until the fog and lake were behind me. The drive back into town was haunted, the streets dim and quiet as if the world outside the lake had no idea of the terror that waited within its waters. I sought out locals again, pressing for stories, hoping for some explanation, some rational anchor. Harold, the old angler, only shook his head. "You saw him," he said quietly. "He's always been here, always will be. The lake, it chooses who it shows itself to. Some leave changed, some don't leave at all." I realized then that my encounter wasn't unique. It was part of a long chain, stretching through decades, threaded with disappearances and whispered warnings. Lake Chelan, I understood finally, was more than a place to fish or camp. It was a living, patient force, and the silent fisherman was its envoy, a guardian of the unseen depths, keeping watch over all who dared trespass in solitude. Weeks later, I returned home, but I could not shake it. The lake haunted my dreams, the figure appearing in reflections and shadows, even in the quiet ripple of a bathtub. I began to understand what the locals meant. Fear, here, was not a reaction. It was a lesson. Some lessons are not taught through words, but through presence, through encounter, through the stark knowledge that the world is larger, stranger, and more indifferent than we can imagine. Lake Chillon had tested me, and though I had survived, I was no longer the same. I had learned patience, humility, and the necessity of listening to the world around me. But more than anything, I learned to respect the silence, for it hides both beauty and terror. And not all that watches is meant to be seen, and not all that is seen will ever let you go. By the time I finally stepped away from Lake Chillon for good, I carried with me a sense of unease that would never fully lift. My name is now Julianne Parker, 38, and though I have camped in countless remote corners of this country, none have left their mark on me the way Chillon did. Even months later, I could feel the memory of that night pressing against the edges of my consciousness. The way the mist rolled over the water, the chill that wasn't entirely from the wind, and the impossibly still figure who seemed to move in a rhythm of its own. It had been silent, watching, waiting, but not malicious, at least not in the way we think of danger. It was something older, something patient, a presence that existed beyond my understanding. And I knew that in leaving the lake, I hadn't escaped it. I had only learned its rules, its quiet demands, and the cost of ignoring them. In the days after my return, I kept replaying every detail, the way the water would shimmer unnaturally when he moved, the subtle sounds of splashes and taps that had followed me through the night, the way the fog seemed to respond to his presence. I realized then that the lake itself was alive in a way I had never experienced. The forest, the water, even the rocks along the shore seemed to breathe with a hidden intelligence. The silent fisherman was its sentinel, and I was now part of a chain of stories, warnings, and encounters that spanned decades. I began to understand that some experiences are meant to teach, to humble, to remind us that nature's patience is endless and its judgment is quiet but absolute. I had been reckless in thinking I could simply observe and walk away unscathed. The lesson I carried home was not fear in the usual sense, but a profound respect. Fear had its place. It had kept me alert, alive, aware of the dangers that lurk when solitude meets something beyond comprehension. But it was respect that lingered in my veins. I learned to listen to the subtle cues around me, the shift of wind, the slight ripple in water, the silence that presses in before a presence makes itself known. I learned to recognize that encounters like mine are not meant to terrify, but to teach boundaries, patience, and the humility of knowing we are small in the face of forces that have existed long before we arrived. Lake Chillon had marked me, not with harm, but with understanding. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can see him, not in nightmares, but in memory. The skiff floating silently, the figure perfectly still, the eyes dark, reflective, unblinking. It is not a ghost or a monster, but a reminder etched into the mind in a way that cannot be ignored. I have shared the story only with those who understand the wilderness, those who know that some places demand more than respect. They demand presence, attention, and the willingness to listen. The lake is still there, and the fisherman remains, waiting silently, watching the currents, patient beyond measure. He is the lesson that the world can give when we step into places untouched, when we assume solitude is safe. It is a reminder that some mysteries are not solved, only endured and remembered. In the end, what I carry with me is not terror, but awareness and a sense of empowerment shaped by humility. The memory of that lake, of the silent fisherman, has taught me to trust my instincts, to value observation over impulse, and to honor the spaces I enter with reverence. There is a strange beauty in knowing that something watches, not to harm, but to remind us that life is fragile, that nature is patient, and that silence can be more instructive than any voice. Lake Chillon will remain, as it always has, a place of reflection, tension, and lessons learned in quiet dread. and I will remember always that in the abyss of its waters, I glimpsed something eternal, silent, and undeniably alive. The first time I set foot in Yellowstone, I didn't come for beauty. I came chasing ghosts. My name is Caleb Morgan. I'm 39 years old, and for most of my life, I've been the kind of man who rationalizes everything. Strange noises in the woods, wind. A shadow at the corner of my eye, bad lighting. A missing hiker, tragic, but explainable. But Yellowstone has a way of chewing through rational men and spitting them out with nothing but stories that don't quite sound real even when you're the one telling them. It was September when I rolled my old Volkswagen camper van through the northern entrance just outside Gardner, Montana. The air smelled of wet pine and sulfur, steam rising from hidden springs that hissed through the cool morning. Tourists crowded the pull-offs, snapping photos of elk that looked almost staged in their majesty. I remember thinking then that the place didn't feel like a park. It felt alive, like it was watching. I'd been on the road for weeks, drifting across Montana's open highways, trying to outrun a kind of emptiness I couldn't name. My marriage had ended in the spring, my teaching job left behind, and I carried only the weight of miles and regret. Yellowstone, with its myths of lost hikers and unsolved vanishings, seemed like a strange place to look for clarity. But I told myself I wanted to camp along the lesser-known trails, the ones where tourists didn't linger. I wanted silence. I wanted to prove that I could sit with myself in the wild and not unravel. At the ranger station, a woman in a faded green uniform glanced at my van and then at me. Her name tag read M. Keller. She gave me the routine safety speech: stay on marked trails, store food properly, watch for bears. But when I asked about camping near the thoroughfare, deep in the southeast corner of the park, her tone shifted. Thoroughfare is the most remote part of Yellowstone, she said, sliding the map toward me. 60 miles from the nearest road. Folks get lost out there. Some don't come back. I wouldn't recommend it alone. Her eyes held mine for a second too long, as though she was weighing whether I could handle what I was asking. I nodded, feigning confidence. That's why I came, I told her. That night I parked near the trailhead, away from the well-lit campgrounds filled with RVs and chatter. The stars over Yellowstone looked closer than anywhere else I'd been. Cold light spilled across my van's roof, and the silence was so complete it almost hurt my ears. I thought about the stories I'd read online, the disappearances, as people like to call them. Some were likely accidents, hikers wandering off trail, losing their bearings, succumbing to exposure, but others left no trace, no footprints, no torn gear, no scent for dogs to follow. It was as if the land itself swallowed them. I laughed it off, sitting on the edge of my van's bed, sipping whiskey from a dented flask. Rational Caleb always had the answer. People wanted mystery, so they turned tragedy into legend. Yellowstone was just a park. A dangerous one, sure, but nothing supernatural. Still, when I lay down and closed my eyes, I heard it. Not the rustle of wind or the distant howl of wolves. This was different. It was a low, dragging sound, like something being pulled slowly across gravel. My breath caught, and I sat up, pressing my ear against the van's metal wall. The sound faded into silence. I told myself it was another camper, maybe someone hauling gear in the dark, but when I peered out through the curtains, the lot was empty. Just my van, alone beneath the stars. The next morning, I shouldered my pack and stepped onto the trail. The first miles were easy, the path winding through meadows of golden grass that bent like waves. Steam vents hissed like living throats. Every few miles, I passed trail markers, thin wooden posts leaning at odd angles, as if the earth had shifted beneath them. By midday, I was deep enough that the chatter of tourists had faded into memory. No laughter, no car doors slamming, only the rhythmic crunch of my boots and the heavy silence of the wilderness. My map told me I was near the eastern ridges where few ventured. That was the draw. But that was also when the unease began to thicken, seeping into me like cold air into bones. It started with the birds. At first, they sang in bursts, Sparrows, thrushes, the occasional raven call. But as I pressed deeper, their voices stopped. One by one, as though the forest had swallowed sound. My boots crunched louder than they should have, each step echoing in my skull. I caught myself glancing over my shoulder, convinced I'd see someone following, though the trail behind me lay empty and untouched. By late afternoon, I reached a clearing where the grass grew waist-high. I dropped my pack, grateful for the chance to rest. The meadow stretched wide, framed by jagged pines, their tips swaying though no wind stirred. I unwrapped a protein bar and chewed slowly, eyes scanning the ridgeline. That was when I noticed it. A shape, far off at the edge of the clearing, half concealed by the trees. It looked like a man, tall, still, standing among the shadows. I raised my hand instinctively, maybe to wave, maybe to reassure myself it was just another hiker. But he didn't move, didn't shift, didn't acknowledge me at all. I blinked and the shape was gone. My chest tightened. I told myself I was tired, that shadows play tricks on the eyes, especially when the sun dips low. Still, when I hoisted my pack and stepped back onto the trail, my pace quickened. I could feel it, something pressing against me from the trees. Watching, measuring. As twilight settled, I set camp near a shallow creek. My van was miles behind me now, just memory. The air grew colder than it should have for September, frost already lacing the grass. I built a small fire, coaxing warmth from damp wood. The flames flickered weakly, painting the trunks in restless orange. I sat there, staring into the fire, telling myself I was fine, that the shape I saw was nothing, that the dragging sound last night was imagination. But the forest pressed closer with each passing minute, and the quiet was wrong. It wasn't peace, it was absence, an emptiness so deep it hummed in my bones. And then the sound returned, soft, deliberate, coming from the darkness just beyond the firelight. That dragging, slow, heavy. Inhaled and exhaled against the soil. I froze, every muscle locking, my breath clouded in the cold air. The fire popped, a spray of sparks shooting upward, and in that brief burst of light, I thought I saw movement, a figure, pale and thin, slipping between the trees. My heart hammered so hard I thought my ribs would crack. And then came the voice. Low, almost whispered, carried on the cold air. It said my name. Caleb. I didn't move at first. I couldn't. The fire cracked, the creek whispered, and yet the only sound that filled my skull was the low voice curling out of the trees. My name, stretched like it belonged to someone else. Caleb. I told myself it was an echo, some trick of the wind bouncing off ridges. But the air was still. My ears strained, desperate for proof that I wasn't alone out here, that maybe it was another hiker, a late camper, a ranger calling out by coincidence. Who's there? My voice broke as I shouted, but the sound felt thin, swallowed instantly by the forest. No answer, just silence. I gripped the handle of my hatchet, a small camp tool I carried more for splitting wood than for defense, and held it across my lap. The fire hissed and sputtered, trying to hold on. I forced myself to breathe. It's nothing. You're tired, Caleb. It's nothing. But as the words left my mouth, I heard it again. Not my name this time. A dragging sound, closer now, like something heavy being pulled over wet earth. I jumped to my feet, scanning the black wall of trees. My fire threw trembling shadows, twisting the trunks into figures that weren't there. The forest seemed to lean in, each branch straining toward me. My own heartbeat drowned out the creek, and then stillness. The dragging stopped. The voice was gone. Only the emptiness remained, heavy as stone. I should have packed my gear right then, shoved everything into my bag, and fled back to the trailhead. But fear does strange things to the mind. Instead, I sat back down, rocking slightly, whispering to myself that it was a dream I'd already woken from. That if I just stayed put, if I just waited, the dawn would burn everything back into sanity. Sleep came in jagged bursts. I'd close my eyes for a second, only to wake at the snap of a twig. Once, I swore I heard footsteps circling my camp, measured, deliberate, always just beyond the light. My fire sank to embers, painting the night with dulled veins. And in the deepest stretch of that night, I dreamed. Or maybe it wasn't a dream. I saw the meadow from earlier, tall grass swaying though no wind stirred it. And standing in the center, a figure. Thin, wrong, its limbs too long for its frame. It didn't walk. It bent forward, dragging itself through the grass, head lolling to the side as though broken. Its mouth opened wide, impossibly wide, and the sound that poured out wasn't human. It was the sound of something being pulled across gravel, that slow, endless drag. I jerked awake, choking on air, sweat freezing on my skin. The fire was gone, snuffed to ash. The forest lay silent. But there, in the dirt just outside my camp, were lines, fresh furrows carved into the soil as though something had been dragged in a wide circle around my fire. The sun rose hours later, pale and indifferent. I packed fast, hands trembling, and set back onto the trail. I told myself I'd turn around, head north, leave Yellowstone, and never look back. But when I reached the trail markers, something was wrong. The posts looked the same, leaning slightly as before, but the symbols carved into them were different. They weren't letters or arrows. They looked older, crude spirals, jagged shapes cut deep into the wood. And though I'd walked this path yesterday, none of it felt familiar now. I pressed on, heart hammering, trying to trust the map. Each mile stretched longer than the last. The silence of the woods was no longer just silence. It was absence. It was as if the park had swallowed every sound but mine, as if it were erasing me step by step. By late morning, I stumbled into another clearing, and that's when I saw it. An old campsite. Torn tent fabric flapped weakly in the breeze. A rusted pot lay overturned in the grass, and by the creek bank, half sunk into mud, was a boot. I froze, throat tightening. I knew about the disappearances. Everyone did. Yellowstone was full of whispered names, hikers who stepped off the trail and never returned. But it was different to stand here, staring at a campsite abandoned in panic, the ground scarred with deep grooves leading away from it, grooves like something heavy had been dragged into the trees. I crouched, touching the mud. It was dry at the surface, but damp underneath. Fresh. Too fresh for something that should have been years old. My hand shook as I pulled back, wiping dirt on my pants. That's when the air shifted. Not a breeze, something deeper. The forest exhaled, branches creaking as if bending toward me. And then from behind the torn tent, a shape stepped out. It wasn't the same as in my dream. Smaller, human, at least in outline. A man, maybe in his 50s, wearing clothes torn and stained with earth. His face was pale, stretched thin over bone, his eyes wide and unfocused. He swayed as if held up by invisible strings. My voice caught. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" He didn't answer. His jaw moved slightly, opening and closing like he was trying to remember how to speak, and then his head tilted back, mouth gaping, and that sound poured out. The dragging, that endless scrape across stone. My knees nearly buckled. I stumbled backward, fumbling for my pack. "Stay away from me," I croaked. But he didn't come closer. He just swayed, eyes never leaving mine, mouth spilling that impossible sound. And then, without warning, he dropped. Fell straight to the ground like his strings had been cut. When I blinked, he was gone. Not lying in the grass, not fading into the trees. Gone. I staggered back, breath ragged, my vision tunneling. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but when I turned to the trail, I froze. The markers were gone. Where there should have been wooden posts, there was nothing but trees. The path twisted in ways that hadn't been there before. Left became right became nothing. I was lost. Utterly, hopelessly lost. The forest around me seemed to lean closer, suffocating, the trees taller than before, their bark etched with spirals like those carved into the markers. My legs moved before I told them to, stumbling forward through underbrush, branches clawing my arms. I don't know how long I ran. Minutes. Hours. My lungs burned, my throat scraped raw from gasping, and then I burst into another clearing and froze. It was the same meadow, the same tall grass, and standing in the center was the same figure from my dream. Too long. Too thin. Head bent at an angle no spine should allow. It didn't move at first. Just watched me with eyes I couldn't see, hidden deep in shadow. And then it whispered. Not my name this time. Just one word. Stay. The meadow swayed, though the air was still. My vision blurred at the edges, panic clawing up my chest. My legs wanted to run, but some part of me, a deep animal part, knew that if I moved, if I turned my back, I wouldn't make it out. So I stood frozen, staring at that impossible figure as the dragging sounds started again. Closer this time, circling. The dragging circled me like a predator too patient to strike. It scraped and rasped across the soil, sometimes far away, sometimes impossibly close, as if invisible chains were being hauled in endless loops. My body screamed at me to run, but the word hung in my skull, deeper than fear, heavier than command. Stay. The figure didn't move, and yet the meadow shifted around it. The tall grass bent inward, each blade leaning toward that impossible frame like worshippers bowing. I couldn't look away. My breath stuttered, shallow, the edges of my vision fading gray. Then, somewhere far off, a sound broke through, a raven's cry. Sharp, real, alive. The spell cracked. My legs found motion, and before I could think, I hurled myself sideways, crashing into the grass, sprinting blind. The dragging chased me, circling tighter, the scrape against stone somehow inside my ears now, not outside. I clawed at the earth, forcing my body forward, my pack slamming against my shoulders, lungs tearing with every breath. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. Anywhere but there. The forest swallowed me again. Branches whipped my face, tore at my clothes. My boots slipped in mud, splashed through shallow streams. My map was useless, crumpled somewhere in my pocket, its neat lines meaningless against the twisting chaos of this place. At some point, my legs gave out. I collapsed against a fallen log, chest heaving, throat raw. My ears rang, but the dragging sound was gone. For the first time since the figure appeared, there was silence. Not peace, never peace here, but silence. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the dirt. My hands shook too hard to hold my flask steady, whiskey sloshing as I tried to force courage down my throat. The burn in my chest was nothing compared to the fire in my lungs. I thought about turning back, about retracing my steps, heading north until I found the van. But when I closed my eyes, I saw the meadow again, the grass bending inward, the figure whispering. I couldn't go back through that, so I pressed forward. The land changed as I stumbled on. The trees grew thicker, their trunks blackened, bark peeling in long strips like old skin. The air stank of sulfur, hot and wet, every breath tasting of rotten eggs. Steam hissed from cracks in the ground, curling around my legs like fingers. I realized with a start I was near geothermal vents. Dangerous ground, unpredictable, the kind rangers warned you never to wander near alone. Pools of water shimmered in the distance, some crystal blue, some opaque and bubbling, their edges ringed with bright orange mineral scars. I stopped, chest tight. There were footprints, not mine. They led from the tree line straight toward one of the steaming pools, bare, human, pressed deep into the wet earth. The stride was long, dragging, each heel gouging the soil like weight was being pulled. I swallowed hard, throat dry. The prints ended at the pool's edge. No return, just vanished into the water. I crouched, squinting at the surface. Bubbles rose slowly, breaking with soft pops. The reflection staring back wasn't quite mine. My face, yes, but stretched, pale, my jaw slack, mouth working silently like the man in the abandoned campsite. I staggered back, heart pounding, and nearly fell into the mud. The dragging returned. Not behind me, not beside me, beneath. A vibration in the ground, subtle at first, then rising, rattling the log behind me. The soil trembled, fissures widening at my feet. A whisper slithered up from the cracks, curling into my ear. Stay. I bolted. No thought, no plan, just raw instinct tearing me through the trees. My lungs burned, legs screaming, but I didn't stop. The forest blurred. Steam vents hissed like voices. Every shadow stretched too long, reaching. At last I burst into another clearing and froze. An old trail sign stood there. Weather-worn, tilted, the wood cracked. But it wasn't the usual park marker. No arrows. No distances. Just one word carved deep into the surface, the letters jagged, uneven. Stay. My stomach dropped. I turned in a slow circle. The clearing was small, hemmed in by trees pressing close, their bark carved with the same spirals I'd seen earlier. Every trunk, every branch etched with patterns that seemed to shift if I stared too long. The forest had led me here, a trap. I pressed my palms to my head, shaking it, trying to force sense into the madness. But then I noticed something half buried at the base of the sign. Fabric. I knelt, pulling it free. A jacket. Torn, stiff with age, the color faded to gray. Inside the collar, stitched in black thread, was a name. K. Darnell. I knew that name. I'd read it in one of those articles about the unsolved disappearances in Yellowstone. Karen Darnell, a tourist from Ohio, vanished in 1998 while hiking near the thoroughfare. No trace ever found. Until now. My breath hitched, the weight of it crushing me. I wasn't imagining this. These weren't shadows and tricks of exhaustion. People had disappeared here, people whose names filled whispers and message boards, and I was standing in the same place, holding proof in my shaking hands. And in the silence that followed, I realized I wasn't alone. Something moved behind me, slow, deliberate. I turned. There, standing at the edge of the clearing, was Karen Darnell, or what was left of her. Her skin was pale, lips cracked, eyes sunken but wide open. Her clothes matched the jacket, though torn, frayed with years of weather. She swayed, just like the man I'd seen before. Her jaw worked open, slack, and that dragging sound poured from her mouth, scraping against my soul. I stumbled back, clutching the hatchet. "Stay," she whispered. Her voice was layered, hers and another beneath it, deeper, ancient, as if the land itself spoke through her throat. I couldn't move, my body locked, trembling, caught between terror and disbelief. And then in the corner of my eye, I saw them. Others. Figures emerging from the trees one by one. Men. Women. Their clothes decades out of date. Their faces hollow but watching. A crowd of the vanish gathering around the clearing, mouths opening in unison. The dragging filled the air, louder now, a chorus of stone grinding against stone. My knees buckled and I dropped to the dirt, clutching my ears. Above it all, one voice rose, curling out of every mouth at once. "Stay." I don't remember deciding to move. My body just reacted, shoving me backward, away from the circle of hollow faces. The crowd closed in, silent now, their mouths gaping as if waiting to swallow the next word. My boots slipped in the mud, caught on roots, tore free again. The jacket of Karen Darnell fell from my hands, abandoned in the dirt like it burned. "Stay." The word didn't come from one mouth anymore. It came from all of them. Layered, overlapping, rising in pitch until the sound became less like language and more like the earth itself grinding open. My legs screamed, but I forced them to run. I lunged for the tree line, ducking under twisted branches, shoving through brambles that clawed my skin. My hatchet clanged against my belt, useless weight as shadows lunged at the corners of my vision. "Stay, stay." The word pursued me, echoing between trees, curling inside my skull. It wasn't just sound anymore, it was pressure. It pressed on my chest, slowed my lungs, made my bones ache like I was being pulled backward with invisible hands. "No," I gasped, the word tearing from my throat, raw and desperate. "No, I'm not." A branch snapped behind me. Not a twig, but something thicker, deliberate, as if one of them had followed me into the woods. I spun, hatchet raised, my breath fogged in the freezing air. Nothing, just trees. But the carvings were there again, spirals, etched deep into bark, glowing faintly as if lit from within. The sight made my vision swim, nausea surging in my gut. I staggered forward, half blind, knowing only that if I stopped, I would never start again. Time dissolved. Minutes stretched into something unmeasurable. The forest became a labyrinth, each tree identical, each shadow whispering the same word. My mind frayed at the edges. Then suddenly, light. Not sunlight. Lantern light. Flickering between the trees, warm and golden. My chest seized with hope so sharp it hurt. I stumbled toward it, crashing through branches until I burst into a clearing. There it was. A cabin. Small, weathered, its wooden walls slanted but intact. Smoke curled faintly from a crooked chimney. A lantern burned on the porch, its glow soft against the dark. For a moment I forgot my fear. I staggered toward it, tears blurring my eyes. A cabin meant people, safety, shelter. But as I climbed the porch steps, the wood groaning under my weight, something in me hesitated. The door stood open, just slightly. Enough that warm air breathed out, smelling faintly of pine smoke. "Hello?" My voice cracked, small in the stillness. "Is anyone?" The door swung wider. I should have turned then. I should have listened to the knot of dread in my chest, the instinct screaming that this wasn't salvation, it was bait. But exhaustion overpowered instinct. I stepped inside. The cabin's interior was sparse. A single table, 2 chairs, a small iron stove with embers glowing faintly within. Dust coated everything, thick, untouched. No footprints, no dishes, no sign of life. Only one thing broke the stillness. On the table lay a stack of maps, Yellowstone maps, faded and torn. I stepped closer, squinting in the dim light. Each one was marked with circles scribbled in black ink. Circles around trails, circles around meadows, circles around clearings, and in the margins, a word scrawled over and over. Stay. My heart hammered as I picked one up, my fingers smudging the ink. Beneath the top map, another, and another. Each marked differently, as though someone had been tracking disappearances for years. I froze when I reached the last. It wasn't a map. It was a page torn from a journal. The handwriting was jagged, frantic. They don't leave. They can't. The land binds them. The trail takes what it wants. I tried to resist, but it follows. It whispers. When it speaks your name, it's already too late. My blood ran cold. Behind me, the door creaked. I turned slowly. In the doorway stood a man. His clothes were ragged, his beard long, his eyes hollow but burning with something desperate. He stared at me as though I were the first living thing he'd seen in years. You shouldn't be here, he rasped. His voice cracked, dry as paper. I swallowed hard, unable to speak. He stepped closer, trembling. It doesn't let you leave. Once it knows your name, it holds you. Don't you hear it? As if summoned, the dragging started again. Low, steady. Circling the cabin, the man's face crumpled. It's already chosen you. My breath stuttered. What are you talking about? He shook his head violently, backing toward the stove. I tried to warn others, but no one listens. They always think it's just a story, just a myth. His voice dropped to a whisper. But I've been here 20 years. I watched them all vanish, one by one. The dragging grew louder, closer. The cabin walls groaned under its weight. Panic clawed my chest. We have to go. We have to run. The man's laugh was broken, hollow. There's nowhere to run. Then, like a switch flipped, the dragging stopped. Silence crushed the cabin, and in that silence the voice returned. My name. Caleb. The man's eyes widened. He backed against the wall, shaking his head. It wants you now, not me. It's always hungry. The lantern flickered violently, shadows writhing across the walls. The stove hissed, embers bursting. I clutched my hatchet tighter, my knuckles white. The door slammed shut. The dragging was inside. I spun wild, but the man was gone. Vanished as though he'd never stood there at all. The cabin pulsed with shadows, the walls bending inward, the word etched into every plank. Stay, stay, stay. I bolted for the door, yanking it open with a scream. Cold air punched my lungs as I stumbled outside, sprinting into the trees. I didn't look back. Couldn't. Branches whipped me raw, roots snagged my boots, but I didn't stop. My body had taken control, pure survival carrying me forward. The dragging chased me, relentless, circling closer, the earth itself vibrating beneath each step. At last, light. This time real. Morning light, pale and thin, bleeding through the treetops. I burst from the trees onto a ridge, collapsing to my knees. The world below opened wide, valleys, rivers, the vast sprawl of Yellowstone bathed in gold. I wept, chest heaving, dirt caked in my teeth. But when I wiped my face and looked again, my stomach twisted. There were no roads, no trails, just endless forest stretching in every direction. And carved into the dirt at my feet, fresh and deep, were the words I'd been running from. Stay. My knees sank into the dirt, trembling under the weight of that word carved fresh at my feet. It didn't look like any tool had made it. The grooves were too wide, too deep, as though the ground itself had split open to write its command. I backed away slowly, chest tight, my breath shallow and ragged. My eyes searched the valley again, hoping, praying, for a road, a trail, a plume of dust from another hiker's boots. Nothing. Just forest that stretched on forever, trees packed tight as a wall, no openings, no escape. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of sulfur and something sweeter, rotting, like meat left too long in the sun. My stomach twisted. That was when I realized the dragging sound hadn't stopped. It was beneath me again. The ridge vibrated, small pebbles rolling toward the carved word. I staggered back, gripping my hatchet, eyes darting for a way down. Caleb. The voice was soft this time, intimate, as though whispered into my ear by someone standing right beside me. I spun, swinging the hatchet wildly, but the ridge was empty. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned and ran, plunging into the trees, branches lashing my arms, my legs pumping on fumes of terror. Every step felt heavier, the ground sucking at my boots, pulling at me. The forest was changing around me. I knew it. The trees weren't where they'd been, paths twisting, roots rising like traps. I stumbled, caught myself, forced forward. I didn't know where I was going anymore. Just away. Away from the carvings, away from the dragging, away from the word that clung to my bones. But then I heard something new. Not the dragging, not my name. A whistle, clear, shrill, human. I froze, chest heaving, ears straining. It came again, 3 sharp notes, the kind rangers used to signal each other across long distances. "Help!" I shouted, voice raw. "I'm here! Please, I'm lost!" Branches cracked ahead. A figure stepped into the clearing. A ranger. The uniform was faded, the badge tarnished, but the wide-brimmed hat and green jacket were unmistakable. Relief flooded me so fast I almost collapsed. "Thank God," I gasped, stumbling forward. "I've been out here for days. I don't know how long. I can't." The ranger raised a hand, palm out. His face was shadowed beneath the brim of his hat, but his mouth curved in a slow, unnatural smile. "Stay." The word fell from his lips like stone. My breath stopped. He tilted his head, smile widening, and for the first time I saw his eyes. Hollow sockets, black and endless. The dragging roared around me. The earth split, dirt trembling, trees groaning as if they were alive. The ranger's body twitched, jerking in sharp spasms as though held by strings. I ran. Blind, desperate, lungs tearing, heart clawing at my ribs. I didn't care where. I didn't care if I looped back into the meadow or the cabin or that cursed clearing. All I knew was that if I stayed 1 second longer, I'd vanish like the rest. The forest became a blur of green and black, roots snagging, branches clawing, shadows whispering. My body begged to collapse, but terror carried me, legs pounding long after they should have failed. And then, miracle. A sound I'd never thought I'd cry for. Engines, distant, faint, but real. The low rumble of cars, the rhythm of civilization. My head snapped toward it, my legs finding new strength. I tore through the underbrush, leaves slashing my face until I burst onto gravel. A road. Not wide, just a maintenance path, the kind used by service trucks, but it was real, solid. Proof I wasn't lost entirely to the trees. I staggered onto it, collapsing to my knees, tears streaking my face. My body shook with relief, every muscle quivering. But when I lifted my eyes, the hope curdled. The road stretched in both directions, empty, and carved into the gravel, gouged deep as though by claws, were the same letters. Stay. I screamed, the sound raw, tearing my throat. My hands clawed at my scalp, pulling at my hair, trying to rip the word out of my mind. But the forest didn't care. The trees leaned closer, the dragging circled again, and the voice whispered, soft and patient. "Caleb, you're ours now." The world tilted. My vision blurred, the road warping, twisting. The letters at my feet shifted, spirals spinning outward until the ground itself seemed to turn beneath me. I stumbled, fell, and the gravel dissolved into dirt, then into grass. I was back in the meadow. The figure waited in the center, arms too long, head bent, mouth yawning open. The vanished circled it. Karen, the old man, countless others, their hollow faces turned toward me. I dropped to my knees, sobbing, my hatchet slipping from my grasp. The figure stepped forward. Each drag of its foot tore the soil, the sound louder than thunder. It lifted one hand, bony and pale, and pointed at me. The vanished whispered in unison, "Stay." I don't know how long I knelt there. Seconds, hours. My mind frayed, unraveling, every thought replaced by the same word, repeating endlessly until it lost meaning. Stay, stay, stay. The last thing I remember before darkness swallowed me was the meadow bending inward, grass leaning close, the figure's shadow stretching long enough to cover the world. Darkness pressed in like a second skin. I don't know if I fainted or if the land itself swallowed me, but when I opened my eyes, the meadow was gone. I was lying on cold stone, Damp air seeped through my clothes, and the smell of sulfur was so strong it burned the inside of my nose. My fingers brushed rough rocks slick with moisture. Somewhere water dripped, echoing like a heartbeat. I pushed myself up, groaning, my body heavy as if the earth had claimed half my weight. I was underground. A cavern. The faintest glow lit the space, greenish, sickly, as if seeping from the rock itself. And I wasn't alone. They were here. The vanished. Dozens of them, maybe more, lining the walls. Karen Darnell, the old man. Others whose names I'd read in articles, whose faces I'd seen on missing posters. Their eyes glowed faintly in the sick light, blank and endless. Their mouths moved in unison, whispering without sound. The dragging began again, this time deeper, rattling the cavern floor beneath me. My teeth vibrated in my skull. The sound wasn't just around me, it was inside me, pulling my bones toward it like chains. And then the figure came. It stepped from the shadows at the far end of the cavern, taller than before, its limbs impossibly long, its head bent so far its chin touched its chest. It dragged itself forward, each step leaving gouges in the stone, its movements jerky, like a puppet straining against its strings. My breath stuttered, my body begged to run, but there was nowhere to go. It stopped before me. Slowly, painfully, it lifted its head. There were no eyes, no features, just a hollow face, blank and smooth except for the mouth. That impossible mouth, stretching wide, opening far too much until it split the head nearly in two. The sound that poured out wasn't just the dragging anymore, it was voices. All the voices of the vanished, layered into one, crashing over me like a wave. Stay. The word rattled through my bones, shook the marrow in my legs. My knees gave and I fell, palms scraping raw against the stone. Tears stung my eyes, but I couldn't blink them away. The sound pressed everything out of me but obedience. Stay. I wanted to resist, to scream no, to rise and fight. But the voices were in my head, my chest, my blood. And for a moment I felt myself slipping, giving in. The thought of surrender carried a strange, awful peace. If I stayed, if I let the land keep me, the fight would end. No more running, no more fear, just silence. But then, through the roar of voices, something broke through. A memory. My sister's voice, laughing by a campfire when we were kids. Her teasing me for being afraid of owls calling in the night. Her telling me, "You're stronger than you think, Caleb. You always were." The voices around me pressed harder, trying to drown it, but the memory clung like fire to dry grass. I forced my mouth open, my throat raw. No. The cavern shook. The figure reared back, its mouth stretching wider, shadows writhing across the walls. The vanished shuddered, their whisper rising to a shriek. I pushed myself to my feet, legs trembling, fists clenched. I won't stay. The dragging roared, stone splitting, cracks spidering beneath my boots. Heat blasted from the fissures, sulfur and fire. The figure lunged forward, its hands swinging down, claws like obsidian. I dove aside, rolling across jagged stone, pain tearing through my body. My hand found the hatchet, the one I thought I'd dropped in the meadow. I didn't question how it was here. Maybe the land wanted me to bring it. Maybe it didn't matter. With a scream, I swung, the blade buried in the figure's arm. For the first time, the sound broke. Not dragging, not voices, something else. A scream, high and piercing, not of this world. The figure recoiled, its limbs jerking wildly, shadows twisting like smoke caught in a storm. I ripped the hatchet free and swung again. And again. Each strike weaker than the last, my body spent, but rage carrying me further. The cavern shook with every blow, the walls splitting, rocks crashing down. The vanished shrieked, their forms unraveling into mist, dissolving into the cracks of the stone. The figure staggered, collapsing backward, its body folding in on itself like paper burning from the edges. Light exploded. When I opened my eyes again, I was on the trail. Daylight poured through the trees, golden and warm. Birds sang overhead, their voices bright and alive. The air smelled of pine and cold water, clean and sharp. I was alone. The meadow was gone. The carvings were gone. The dragging was gone. My pack lay a few feet away, torn but intact. My map was folded neatly beside it as if someone had placed it there. My hatchet, bloodless now, leaned against a tree. I didn't question it. I just ran. I don't remember how I found the road or how long I walked. Hours, maybe days. But eventually I stumbled into a ranger station. My clothes were shredded, my body a map of cuts and bruises, my eyes wild. The rangers asked where I'd been. I couldn't answer. How could I tell them that the land itself had tried to keep me? That the vanished weren't gone at all, but waiting, bound in shadows beneath the trails? How could I explain the dragging, the whispers, the word carved into the earth? I told them I got lost. That exhaustion made me hallucinate. That's what they wanted to hear, and maybe that's what they believed. But I know the truth. Yellowstone keeps its secrets, and sometimes its secrets keep you. I drove out of the park 2 days later, my Volkswagen rattling down the highway, the world opening wide again. Civilization returned. Gas stations, billboards, towns with diners that smelled of coffee and grease. I should have felt safe. I should have felt free. But even now, months later, when the night is quiet and the world goes still, I hear it. The dragging. Soft at first, then louder. And sometimes just before I fall asleep, I hear my name. Whispered, patient, waiting. Caleb. The first night at Mount Shasta hit harder than I expected. The air was colder, sharper, carrying a damp scent that seemed almost alive, crawling into my nose and settling in my lungs. I had parked my old Volkswagen bus near the edge of the clearing, where the trees thinned enough to give me a view of the mountain's shadow, jagged and impossible under the moonlight. My friends, Leo and Marissa, were unpacking their tents nearby, their voices a quiet hum against the rustle of leaves and the occasional distant hoot of an owl. I told myself it was just the wilderness, that the mountain was just a mountain, but the tremor under my feet as I stepped out of the bus made me pause. A low vibration, barely perceptible, yet enough to make the ground seem alive, as if it were breathing beneath me. We set up the camp quickly, and the night grew in intensity around us. The forest seemed to lean closer, the pines swaying in a rhythm I couldn't explain. Leo laughed nervously, flicking a lighter and shining its flame into the darkness. "Feels like it's watching us," he said half-jokingly. Marissa shivered, hugging her jacket closer. I felt it too. Something was off, subtle, like a note just beneath a melody. I tried to shake it, focusing on the practical. Firewood, dinner, the familiar routines that always grounded me in these trips. But the tremors didn't stop. They came intermittently, small but distinct, rolling through the dirt like a warning. Later, when the fire burned down to embers and Marissa had gone to her tent, I stayed outside with Leo, staring at the mountain. The silence between tremors pressed against me, and then we saw it, a faint glow, red-orange like molten metal, flickering beneath the mountain's base. It pulsed in a rhythm that felt deliberate, almost hypnotic. "Probably a miner," Leo said, but I didn't believe him. There was no mining operation this deep, not documented anyway, and the light was too alive. It seemed to shift, crawling beneath the ground in waves, like it had its own consciousness. By midnight, the forest was unrecognizable. The air was thick, carrying a faint metallic tang, and every small sound, the snap of a branch, the scuttle of some unseen creature, echoed in the darkness like a threat. Leo was quiet, uncharacteristically still. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. At first I thought it was an animal, the usual nocturnal shuffle, until the sound repeated, a low, resonant chant, muffled, coming from somewhere beneath the mountain. It wasn't human, not in any language I knew, but it was structured, purposeful. My pulse spiked. I wanted to dismiss it, but instinct clawed at me, whispering that something had been disturbed, that we weren't supposed to be here tonight. I tried to convince myself to stay grounded, to remember that this was just Mount Shasta, a famous peak with a history of legends, nothing more. But when we decided to go back to our respective sleeping arrangements, the tremor hit again, stronger this time, rattling the windows of the Volkswagen bus. A low vibration hummed through my bones. I gripped the steering wheel and thought, for a moment, that the mountain itself might be alive. Marissa's scream cut through the night, sharp and urgent. We ran toward her tent, stumbling through the underbrush, hearts hammering, until we found her sitting rigidly inside, eyes wide, staring at a patch of ground that seemed different. The soil had risen slightly, disturbed in concentric rings as if something beneath had pressed upward. No one spoke much after that. We tried to sleep, but the tremors continued, sporadic and growing. The glow beneath the mountain flared intermittently, lighting the tents with an otherworldly orange. I could feel it in my chest, a pressing weight of dread. Leo muttered about underground rivers of lava or gas pockets, but even he didn't sound convinced. My mind kept returning to the chanting. It was louder now, unmistakable, echoing beneath the mountain in a pattern that was maddeningly hypnotic. I couldn't escape it, even when I covered my ears. I lay awake in the Volkswagen, staring at the ceiling, tracing the familiar dents and scratches as if they could anchor me in reality, trying to convince myself it was only the mountain, that it was only stories. The next morning, Marissa was gone. Leo and I woke to the faint smell of sulfur and the absence of her soft snores. At first, I thought she had gone for a hike without telling us, but the camp was untouched. Her belongings were still there, neatly packed into her small backpack. A fresh tremor rolled through the ground, and my stomach dropped. We called her name, shouting into the clearing, but the response was only the echo of the mountain and the whispering pines. My mind raced. The chanting from last night had stopped, replaced by a silence that pressed in, heavy and unnatural. We decided to search the surrounding area, moving cautiously, senses heightened. Every step seemed amplified. The crunch of pine needles, the snap of twigs, even our own breathing felt loud and wrong. We followed a narrow game trail toward the base of the mountain, and then I saw it. A faint trail of footprints leading into a rocky crevice that seemed to disappear into the mountain itself. The glow flickered from below, and with it the whisper of the chanting returned, pulling at my chest like a magnet. Leo hesitated. "We shouldn't," he said, voice shaking. But the need to find Marissa overpowered reason. We descended carefully, using the Volkswagen's flashlight and our own hands to navigate the uneven rock. Inside the crevice, the air changed. It was warmer, damp, smelling of earth and something else, something alive. The glow intensified, revealing carvings on the stone walls, intricate symbols, geometric shapes intertwined with figures that looked almost human, frozen in poses of worship or terror. The chanting became clearer, rhythmic, as if the mountain itself was trying to communicate. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but I pushed forward, calling Marissa's name with each step. And then we saw her, or what remained, a faint outline of her form, translucent, flickering in the glow like a candle about to go out. She raised a hand toward us, eyes wide in silent panic, then vanished into the stone wall, leaving nothing but the faint echo of her scream behind. Leo and I scrambled back, hearts pounding, gasping in the mountain air. The tremors were now constant, the glow under the mountain a pulsing beacon, and the chanting had become a deafening resonance in my skull. We collapsed near the Volkswagen, trembling, unable to speak, unable to process. That night the forest seemed closer than ever, the shadows pressing in, whispering threats we couldn't decipher. We drove away at first light, leaving behind everything, leaving behind Marissa and the invisible city beneath the mountain that had claimed her. Even now, months later, I can feel it beneath my feet whenever I drive near Shasta. The mountain isn't just a place. It's a presence. It's a presence, a reminder that some stories aren't meant to be told lightly, and some paths aren't meant to be followed. Camping, once my escape, became a lesson in humility, in fear, in the fragility of human curiosity. Every Volkswagen trip since has carried the memory of that hollow beneath Mount Shasta, a constant whisper reminding me that the world holds secrets that watch, that wait, and that sometimes when you chase the light, you vanish into the dark. I remember the smell first, the acrid, metallic tang that hit me as soon as we put a few miles between the base of Mount Shasta and the nearest highway. It wasn't just fear. It was something deeper, like the mountain had left a mark on my skin, invisible yet impossible to ignore. Leo drove in silence, eyes fixed on the road, hands gripping the wheel as if it could anchor him to something real. I couldn't stop replaying the image of Marissa disappearing into the stone, her outline flickering in that strange glow, and the carvings on the walls that seemed to pulse with life. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see it. The underground city, the hidden passages, the chanting that was no longer just sound but vibration, coursing through my chest like an organism of its own. Sleep was impossible that night. In the back of the Volkswagen, I kept the engine running, the hum vibrating through my bones, trying to replace the mountain's resonance with something mundane. But every bump in the road, every shadow that flickered across the trees, felt like a reminder that Mount Shasta wasn't done with us. Leo eventually turned to me, eyes hollow, and said, "Do you think it wanted her? Or us? Or just to scare us?" His voice was raw, fractured. I had no answer. The logical part of me wanted to dismiss it as mass hysteria, trauma amplified by isolation and darkness. But another part, the part that had stared at those symbols and felt the pulse beneath the stone, knew better. I didn't sleep, and when morning came, we were no closer to understanding what had happened. Weeks passed, but the memory of that night grew heavier, pressing on my consciousness. I avoided Mount Shasta, avoided any conversation that might dredge up the story. But it followed me. In my dreams, I was back in that crevice, the glow of the hidden city illuminating walls carved with impossible shapes, the chanting a constant undertone to my heartbeat. Sometimes I would wake with the vibration still in my chest, as though the mountain had lodged a piece of itself inside me. I began noticing tremors elsewhere, minor, almost laughable to anyone else, but to me they were echoes of that hollow beneath Shasta, warning me that curiosity carries consequences. It was Leo who broke the silence first. He called one night, voice tight with urgency. I think I know where she went." My stomach dropped. Every rational thought I had fought to hold on to dissolved instantly. "Where?" I demanded, though a part of me feared the answer. "Not here. Not anywhere on the surface. I've been reading, looking into legends, occult histories. They talk about a hidden city beneath Shasta, places people disappear into when the mountain calls them. It's not physical in the way we understand. It's a threshold, and I think she crossed it." I remember sitting in my Volkswagen, hands gripping the steering wheel like it could hold me in reality, as Leo's words sank in. A threshold. The idea terrified me, but a part of me, a foolish, desperate part, wanted to see it for myself. Months of denial, of trying to ground myself in mundane explanations, crumbled into a single terrifying thought. Marissa wasn't gone in a conventional sense. She had followed the chant, stepped into the hollow beneath the mountain, and left our world behind. I drove back toward Shasta, not knowing what I expected to find. The forest seemed different this time, as though it had been holding its breath, waiting for me to return. The Volkswagen hummed under me, familiar yet insignificant against the presence of the mountain. When I reached the clearing, the air was thick with that same metallic tang. The tremors pulsed beneath my feet like a heartbeat. The glow was faint, almost teasing, and the chanting started again, so quiet at first that I thought I imagined it. But it grew, rhythmic, structured, hypnotic. The same chant that had lured Marissa. I parked near the crevice, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed to turn back, to leave before the mountain claimed me too. But I couldn't. Not yet. I stepped closer, and the air vibrated with a strange energy. My hands felt heavy, my ears rang, and I noticed the carvings on the walls again, half buried under moss and shadows. They weren't just symbols. They were warnings, instructions, something I didn't understand. I traced the lines with my fingers, feeling the cold stone pulse beneath my touch. The chanting swelled, and suddenly I knew I was standing at the edge of something impossible, something alive beneath the earth, something that had chosen her and might choose me next. I descended slowly into the crevice, flashlight in hand. The walls narrowed, then opened into a cavern I had only glimpsed in my dreams. The glow emanated from crystalline formations embedded in the stone, pulsing in the rhythm of the chant. My skin prickled as I moved forward, every nerve screaming that I was trespassing in a world that did not belong to me. And then I saw her, or a vision of her. Marissa stood at the center of the cavern, surrounded by the symbols. Her eyes met mine, wide with terror, and she mouthed something I couldn't hear. Then, just as before, she flickered and vanished, leaving only the echo of her presence and the insistent pulse beneath the stone. I stumbled back, heart racing, mind screaming. The realization hit me with a clarity I could not escape. The mountain didn't take people randomly. It didn't act out of malice or curiosity. It required attention, obedience, belief. Those who sought, who followed, could enter its hollow, and those who were dragged inside became part of it, feeding its pulse, sustaining the hidden city beneath Shasta. Every story, every disappearance, every legend I had brushed off as myth was proof of that. I fled the cavern, scrambling into the Volkswagen and driving away, ears ringing, hands slick with sweat, every shadow outside the vehicle a potential watcher. I never spoke of it publicly. The mountain is patient, and I learned that fear is a lesson best internalized. Every Volkswagen trip since carries the same whisper beneath my feet, the same subtle tremor that reminds me of the hidden city. Mount Shasta waits, glowing, pulsing, patient, with thresholds that call and claim. And in the quiet moments when the world feels too stable, I remember Marissa's eyes, and the lesson hits me. Some curiosity is too dangerous to indulge. Some paths too hidden to follow, and some mountains hold entire worlds beneath them, watching, waiting, and choosing who may pass and who will vanish into the hollow. I can still feel it sometimes, even now, the vibration under my feet, faint but persistent, like a heartbeat reaching from somewhere deep beneath Mount Shasta. It's subtle, easy to ignore if I try, but when I'm alone, camping in my Volkswagen on a quiet night, it reminds me that the mountain never really lets go. After that second visit, I stopped going near the crevice. I avoided the trails, the glowing patches of moss, the whispers carried on the wind. But the memory of Marissa, the way she had disappeared into nothing, clung to me, shaping every trip, every choice, every hesitation I felt in the woods. Months later, Leo and I returned, not to follow the path, not to chase the glow, but to understand it, to face the mountain without letting it take another friend. We parked our Volkswagens at the same clearing, engines humming like fragile shields against the mountain's pulse. The tremors were lighter this time, like a gentle warning instead of a threat. The forest was quiet, holding its breath, and I realized the mountain wasn't just hiding a city. It was alive in ways I couldn't begin to comprehend. The carvings on the walls, the chanting, the glow, they weren't random. They were a language, an invitation, a test. I didn't want to cross that threshold again, but I needed to understand it, to make peace with what had happened. As we hiked cautiously toward the crevice, I noticed every detail. The way the air changed as we neared, heavy with the smell of iron and wet stone, the faint rhythmic vibration beneath the ground, the way the shadows seemed to shift independently of the moonlight. Leo stayed close, muttering theories and old legends under his breath, but even he was quiet in awe and fear. When we reached the edge of the cavern, the glow was dim, pulsing like a heartbeat slowed down, patient. I didn't move closer. I just watched, listening, feeling the weight of the mountain pressing against my chest. I understood then that some doors, once glimpsed, could never fully close. The mountain had claimed Marissa, but it hadn't claimed our curiosity entirely. It demanded respect. I stayed there for hours, silent, staring at the glow beneath the stone, feeling the pulse of something vast and ancient. I thought of all the times I had dismissed warnings, rationalized tremors, ignored the whisper in my gut that told me to leave. The mountain had shown me that fear isn't weakness, it's information. It's the mind's way of recognizing limits, of acknowledging that some forces are too large, too deliberate, too old to confront without consequence. I didn't need to enter the hollow to learn that lesson. I didn't need to chase Marissa into the shadows. Observing, understanding, respecting, that was enough. When we finally turned back, the glow faded behind us and the forest returned to normal, at least on the surface. But the lesson lingered. The Volkswagen carried us down the mountain roads, headlights slicing through fog and pine, and I felt a sense of reverence I hadn't known before. Camping for me had always been about adventure, about freedom, about pushing boundaries. Now it was about awareness, about listening, about understanding that the world holds mysteries that are not ours to solve, that some thresholds are meant to be observed, not crossed. I keep the memory of that night close, tucked into the recesses of my mind like a talisman. Every trip I take, every forest I enter, I move with care, respect, and humility. Mount Shasta taught me that courage isn't about ignoring fear. It's about acknowledging it, letting it guide you, and knowing when to turn away. The hollow beneath the mountain still exists, still pulses, and perhaps it still waits. But I have learned to live with that knowledge, carrying it in my chest like a heartbeat in rhythm with the mountain itself. Even in the quietest moments, the tremors whisper, reminding me that the world is bigger than my understanding and that the thrill of exploration comes with responsibility. Camping in a Volkswagen isn't just about the destination or the freedom of the road. It's about connection to nature, to oneself, and to the unseen forces that shape the world around us. Every scratch in the wood, every vibration beneath my feet, every flicker of a strange glow is a reminder that life is fragile, that curiosity is powerful, and that some mountains are sacred thresholds between what is seen and what is hidden. When I drive away from Mount Shasta now, I look at the silhouette of the mountain against the sky, and I feel a strange mixture of fear, awe, and gratitude. Fear, because it is alive in ways I cannot fully grasp. Awe, because I have glimpsed something ancient and unknowable. Gratitude, because I survived, because I returned with understanding rather than lost to the hollow beneath. And in that understanding, I find the courage to keep exploring, to keep camping, to keep embracing the freedom of the road in my Volkswagen, but always with respect for the whispers beneath the soil, the pulse beneath the stones, and the secrets that the mountains keep. Some nights, when the wind carries the faint hum of an unseen chant, I pause and close my eyes. I let it wash over me, not with panic, but with awareness. The mountain is patient. It watches. It waits. And I have learned that the greatest courage lies not in chasing what calls to us, but in knowing when to stand at the threshold, feel the pulse, and walk away with both humility and wonder. That is the lesson I carry forward in every mile I travel, in every campsite I visit, and in every heartbeat that reminds me that some mysteries are not meant to be solved. They are meant to transform the way we live and breathe, forever tethered to the quiet, hidden city beneath Mount Shasta. I never thought the road itself could turn against me, but that's what it felt like, an invisible enemy waiting for the moment my guard jaw dropped, for the moment my rig coughed, stuttered, and fell silent in the middle of nowhere. My name's Marcus. I'm 53 years old. I've been on the road longer than most people can imagine. Decades of highways, dirt trails, campsites, and all the lonely places in between. I live in an RV, and I've always told myself that I know what I'm doing. I've dealt with blown tires on mountain passes, sudden snowstorms in Nevada, a flash flood in Arizona that nearly swept my camper off the road. But I'll tell you this, nothing humbles you. Nothing strips you down to the bone, like breaking down in the wilderness when the night is coming, when help is farther than the horizon, and when you start to realize that maybe, just maybe, you aren't alone out there. That evening had started out fine. I was pushing across a stretch of Wyoming backcountry, the kind of forgotten road you only take when you're chasing silence. I liked it that way. I'd been craving distance from people, from the endless static of the modern world. Out there, with the mountains fading to shadow in the distance, it was just me, the hum of my rig, and the sharp smell of sagebrush rolling in through the window. But the hum changed. I knew it the second it did. Anyone who drives long enough develops an ear for their engine. One little knock, one shift in rhythm, and you can feel it in your gut. At first, I tried to ignore it, convincing myself I could make the next town. The map had shown a place 40 miles ahead, some forgotten dot of a community where I could at least park for the night. But denial is dangerous. 10 miles later, Right as the sun bled down behind the boots, the engine sputtered once, twice, and then died. I rolled to a stop on the shoulder of a road that felt more like a scar carved through emptiness. Dust drifted up in the still air. The silence that followed was deafening. It pressed on me harder than any sound could have, as if the whole desert leaned in to listen. I stepped out, boots crunching gravel, and the first thing I noticed was the smell. It wasn't oil or gasoline. It was this faint metallic tang, like blood carried on the wind. My mind played tricks. Maybe it was just rust in the dust. Maybe nothing. But I couldn't shake it. I popped the hood and stared into the mess of pipes and metal I'd coaxed across thousands of miles. The engine was hot, ticking as it cooled, but the truth hit me fast. I wasn't getting it running tonight. I cursed under my breath, but cursing didn't change anything. The desert was already turning cold. Shadows stretched long across the sage. The sky deepened into that strange Wyoming twilight where the world looks painted in bruise-colored light. I told myself I'd camp beside the rig until morning, try to flag someone down at first light. Logical, practical. That's what I do, solve problems, one step at a time. But logic doesn't help when unease creeps in. The stillness wasn't normal. Back home in Montana, the nights are alive. Crickets, owls, coyotes. Out there, it was as if someone had muted the land. My ears strained for sound, but all I caught was the faint tick of the cooling engine and the thud of my own heartbeat. The longer it stayed silent, the louder my thoughts became, until I started imagining that maybe there were sounds, but too faint for me to hear. Maybe whispers under the wind. I set up camp a few yards from the rig, just a small fire, enough to fight back the chill. The flames crackled weakly, as if even the wood was reluctant to speak. I sat there with a cup of instant coffee, watching the desert stretch into blackness. That's when the knocking started. At first, I thought it was my imagination, the echo of the engine's last dying sputter still playing in my head. But it grew clearer. A slow, deliberate knock, like knuckles on wood. Not close, not far, somewhere out there in the dark. I froze, mug halfway to my lips. You tell yourself all kinds of things in moments like that. Maybe it's just a branch tapping against another. Maybe it's the shifting of the earth as the temperature drops. My mind ran down the list of rational explanations, but none of them fit. It was too steady, too intentional. I grabbed my flashlight and swept the beam across the sagebrush. The silver cone of light cut through the dark, catching nothing but twisted branches and empty ground. Still, the knocking continued. 3 taps, pause, 3 more. My chest tightened with each set, my gut telling me it wasn't mechanical, it wasn't natural. It was someone. I tried to shout out, "Hello? Who's there?" But my voice cracked in the still air. No reply. Just silence, then the knock again, a little closer. The fire popped behind me, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. That's when I realized how far I'd wandered from the safety of its glow, the rig looming as a darker shadow in the night. I forced myself back toward it, every step feeling like a test of will against the urge to run. I made it to the fire and sat hard on my camp chair, forcing myself to breathe slow. My hands shook, not from the cold, but from something deeper, a primal fear, the kind that doesn't ask permission, the kind your body remembers even if your mind tries to rationalize it away. The knocking stopped. I should have been relieved, but the silence that followed was worse. It felt like waiting, like something holding its breath just out of sight. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it again, sometimes knocking, sometimes scratching, sometimes just the faint crunch of gravel as if someone circled the camp but never came close enough for me to see. Each time I jerked awake, I swept the flashlight, but the desert always stared back empty, vast, unbroken. When the first smear of dawn light touched the horizon, I felt like I'd survived a siege. The fire was dead, my nerves frayed raw. I forced myself up, checked the rig, tried the ignition out of sheer stubbornness. Nothing. Dead as before. That left me with one option: start walking. The map had said 40 miles to the next town. Maybe less if I was lucky, but either way, it would be a long stretch. I packed water, a few supplies, and left the RV behind. It felt wrong to leave it, like abandoning a piece of myself, but the desert doesn't care about sentiment. Survival demands movement. As I walked, the sun rose higher, burning away the shadows. The land looked normal again, just rolling sage, dry earth, endless sky. I almost convinced myself the night had been nothing but nerves, exhaustion twisting sound into fear. But then I looked back. There, in the dust along the side of the rig, were footprints. Not mine, not boots, bare feet. And they circled the RV again and again, as if someone had spent the night walking around it, tracing loops tighter and tighter. The desert wind hadn't touched them. They were fresh. And in that moment I knew the road wasn't my enemy. Something else was. I don't know if you've ever walked away from the only shelter you had, knowing you might not see it again. An RV isn't just steel and rubber. It becomes your walls, your roof, your whole sense of safety. Leaving mine behind felt like peeling off my own skin. But the footprints kept me moving. They weren't fading in the morning light the way I expected either. Each bare print pressed sharp into the dust, toes etched as clearly as if they'd been stamped just minutes before. I stared too long, trying to judge the size, the weight. Human, but not right. Too long, like someone's toes had stretched out beyond what they should have been. I forced myself to keep walking, eyes fixed on the ribbon of road ahead. The sun climbed fast, and with it came the heat, dry, punishing, the kind that makes your tongue feel like leather. The land shimmered, mirage upon mirage, like the desert was holding up false promises of water just to laugh when I got closer. Hours passed, my water bottle lighter each time I lifted it. Every so often I'd hear something behind me, that crunch of gravel again, faint but steady. The first few times I whipped around, nothing was there. Just endless desert. Eventually I stopped looking, because looking didn't change it. That was when the smell hit me. Not the metallic tang from the night before, something fouler, rancid, like meat left to rot in the sun. It came in waves, faint, then strong, then faint again, as if whatever carried it was drifting closer, then farther. My stomach knotted and I pulled my shirt up over my nose, but it didn't help. The stink wasn't just in the air. It clung to me, wormed its way inside until I swore I could taste it. I tried to tell myself it was roadkill, maybe a deer gone down out here, left to the coyotes. But when the road curved and the wind shifted, I saw there were no vultures circling, no coyotes picking clean. Just the emptiness and the smell growing stronger. That's when I saw the second set of footprints. They didn't come from behind me this time. They appeared on the shoulder of the road ahead, crossing from one side to the other. The same shape, bare, long, too long, and fresh. I stopped cold, every muscle in my body seizing. My shadow stretched thin on the asphalt as I stared at them, heart hammering in my throat. And then I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. Not wood this time. Not distant. The sound carried across the wide open, somehow clear despite the wind, like someone rapped knuckles against a door I couldn't see. The desert around me looked empty, but I felt eyes on me. My skin prickled. My throat went dry, even though I'd just taken a swig of water. I turned in a circle. Flashlight clutched in my pack, though the sun blazed high, useless against daylight. Then, silence. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, but eventually my legs carried me forward again. Each step past those footprints felt like trespassing into a space I wasn't meant to enter. By the time the sun dipped, I hadn't found the town. The map must have lied, or I'd underestimated the distance. The horizon burned red, and I knew if I didn't stop soon, night would catch me on the open road. And after what had happened the night before, that was the last thing I wanted. I spotted a stand of cottonwoods not far off the shoulder, a rare patch of green against the barren land. Shade, maybe shelter. I cut across, boots crunching dry soil, and set up camp beneath their whispering branches. The second night was worse. I built a small fire with what wood I could find, but the cottonwoods groaned in the wind, branches creaking like old bones. I kept glancing back at the road, half expecting to see someone walking it barefoot, too tall, too thin. The knocking came again, only this time it didn't stay distant. It started as before, steady, deliberate. Then closer, knock, knock, knock. As if it circled the trees, testing them the way it had tested the RV. I pressed my back against the trunk, flashlight trembling in my grip, fire throwing wild shadows across the ground. The smell returned too. That rotting stench, thick enough I gagged behind my sleeve. My eyes watered, and I thought I saw movement just beyond the firelight, something crouched low, darting between the brush. I shouted again, voice breaking. "Who's out there?" No reply. Just a low laugh carried on the wind, so faint I wondered if it was even real. A laugh, or maybe the cottonwoods themselves bending and groaning, but it chilled me to the marrow. I didn't sleep, not really. I sat there until my eyelids dragged, head snapping up every time the knocking resumed. Sometimes it was to my left, sometimes behind me, sometimes impossibly close, like someone wrapped their fingers right against the bark I leaned against. When morning came, my body ached, nerves stretched to breaking. I thought maybe I dreamed it all, some trick of exhaustion and fear, until I looked down. Around the fire pit, circling it the way the footprints had circled my rig, were fresh tracks. Bare, long-toed, pressed deep into the dirt, and in the ashes of the fire 3 perfect knocks. Not branches fallen, not stones misplaced. 3 indentations side by side as if something had tapped the fire itself with invisible hands. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. The desert seemed to tilt around me, the air too sharp, too bright. I couldn't keep going on foot. If I did, I'd collapse before I ever reached help. So I made the choice no RVer ever wants to make. I turned back. Each step toward the rig felt like defeat, but also like survival. Maybe if I got back, if I stayed with it, I could wait for help. Someone would come down that road eventually. Someone had to. But as I retraced my path, my unease thickened. Because every mile closer to the RV, the footprints increased. Not just one set circling, but dozens. Some overlapped, some trailed away into the brush, some cut straight across the road as if whoever or whatever made them had been pacing, waiting. When I finally saw my rig, it was worse than I imagined. The dust around it was shredded with tracks, so many it looked like a crowd had gathered in the night. They led right up to the door, pressed deep as if someone had stood there, knocking again and again, and the door was open. Just a crack, but open. I froze in the middle of the road, sweat turning cold on my skin. I'd locked it. I knew I had. I never leave that door unlocked, not in the wild. Yet it hung there, swaying gently in the hot wind, creaking like the cottonwoods. The sun beat down merciless, but I felt cold. My body screamed to run, but there was nowhere to run to. The town still miles ahead. The night waiting to swallow me if I stayed out in the open. So I did the only thing I could. I stepped closer. The smell hit me first, rolling out from inside the rig. Not just rot this time. Damp earth, mildew, something swampy and suffocating. I gagged, covering my mouth, but I couldn't stop my eyes from lifting to the dark slit of the open doorway. Inside, it was silent, but I could feel it. Something waiting. I took another step, boots crunching gravel, each one louder than I wanted. My hand reached out, slow, trembling, toward the door handle. The metal burned hot in the sun, but under that heat, it felt slick, wet. I jerked my hand back, staring at the faint smear on my palm. It looked like water at first, then I smelled it. Copper, blood, and from inside the RV, deep in the shadows, something knocked back. The knock froze me in place. 3 dull thuds, as if someone rapped their knuckles against the inside wall of my RV, the same rhythm that had haunted me since that first night. My breath caught. I wanted to believe it was an echo, maybe a loose panel settling in the heat, but I knew better. The sound had weight, intention. I stood there on the gravel shoulder, staring at the half-open door. The desert sun hammered down, but it was colder near the rig. The air pouring out of the doorway felt damp, clammy, like breathing into a wet rag. I could almost see it, a shimmer that didn't belong, as if the shadow inside was heavier than the light outside. I whispered to myself, "You need to know." Because not knowing was worse. My whole life on the road had been built around facing problems, not hiding from them. but my gut screamed at me to turn around, to walk away and never look back. I climbed the steps. The smell was overwhelming. Rot, mildew, copper. My stomach lurched as I pulled the door wider. It groaned on its hinges like it hadn't been used in years, though I knew I'd closed it just yesterday. Inside, the light was strange. My curtains were drawn, but thin blades of sun cut through the cracks, slicing the interior into jagged shadows. My rig looked the same, table bolted down, by cabinets latched. My bedding rumpled where I'd left it, but everything felt shifted, off, as if the whole place had been nudged slightly sideways when I wasn't looking. I called out, my voice trembling. "Who's here?" No answer. Just silence, then the faint drip of water somewhere deeper inside. But there wasn't any water line in that direction. I stepped in, forcing myself past the doorway. My boots stuck slightly against the linoleum floor, as if it were damp. My eyes flicked to the small counter where my coffee mug from the night before still sat. It was empty. It was empty when I left it. Now it was half full. The liquid was dark, red, and thick. I stumbled back, bumping against the wall. That's when the knocking resumed. Not in front of me, not behind me, but beneath me. From under the RV, a slow, hollow thud against the floor. My pulse roared in my ears. I crouched, pressing my hand to the linoleum. The knock came again, right under my palm, strong enough to vibrate through my bones. I backed toward the door, chest heaving, when I saw the footprints. They weren't outside anymore. They were inside. Bare, long-toed impressions pressed into the damp floor, leading from the back of the RV straight toward me. The tracks stopped just a few feet away, pointing at me like an accusation. And the worst part? They were wet. Small puddles pooled where the toes had pressed deepest, as if someone had just walked in dripping from a swamp. That's when I heard it. Breathing. Low, raspy, wet, like lungs filling and emptying through water. It came from the bedroom at the back. I wanted to run, but my legs locked. I could picture it too clearly. Something waiting in the shadows, crouched on my bed, chest heaving in that awful rhythm. I forced my legs to move. I bolted down the steps, nearly falling as my boots slipped on the gravel. Outside, the sun felt like salvation, but the smell followed me, clinging to my clothes, to my skin. The door creaked as it swung shut behind me. I didn't close it. I didn't touch it. But it sealed with a soft click, like the rig had decided it didn't want me back inside. I stumbled away, heart hammering, staring at the RV from the road. For a long moment, nothing moved. No sound, no knock. Just silence and that heavy shimmer in the air around it. And then, slowly, the curtain at the front window twitched, pulled back. A face stared out at me. Not human. Not exactly. Too pale, skin sagging as if it had been soaked too long. The eyes were wrong, too large, too dark, glistening in the shadows. It pressed close to the glass, lips parting as if it wanted to speak. But no words came. Just fog, condensing against the inside of my window. I staggered back until I nearly fell into the ditch. My voice cracked, begging the empty road, "Please, someone, anyone." No one came. The desert stretched silent and endless. I don't know how long I stood there, locked in a stare, with whatever had taken up inside my home on wheels. Finally, the curtain dropped. The face vanished, but I couldn't leave it. That RV was everything. My shelter, my only way out of this emptiness. If I walked away, I was as good as dead. But if I went back inside, I didn't know what waited. I circled it instead, keeping my distance, scanning the dust around it. The footprints multiplied the farther I looked. Some led away from the rig, disappearing into the sagebrush. Others circled, tight spirals pressed so deep they cracked the dry earth. And under the rear bumper, something else, a handprint. Not footprints this time, but a palm pressed flat into the dirt, fingers spread wide. Long. Too long. I felt dizzy, weak. My water was almost gone, my head pounding from the heat and fear. I couldn't think straight anymore. Every instinct screamed at me to move, but there was nowhere safe. The town ahead might not even exist. The desert behind stretched empty for miles. And here was my RV, my only shelter, claimed by something I couldn't understand. The sun bled lower, shadows stretching. I knew the night would fall soon, and with it, the knocking. I couldn't survive another night outside. So I made the only choice I had left. I climbed back inside. The air hit me like a wall, wet, foul, suffocating. I gagged, pulling my shirt up over my mouth, eyes stinging. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, shaking in my hand. The footprints were still there, the mug still filled, but the bedroom was empty. The bed rumpled, but no figure waiting. The breathing had stopped. I shut the door and locked it, pressing my forehead against the metal. My whole body trembled. I told myself if I stayed quiet, if I didn't acknowledge it, maybe it would leave. But then the knocking started again. Not outside this time, not under the floor, from inside the walls. The first knock came from the wall to my right, near the small dining table. A hollow thud, soft but deliberate, like someone pressed their fist against the thin paneling and rapped 3 times. I froze in the middle of my own home, breath caught in my throat. Then it came again, this time behind me, from the bathroom wall. Thud, thud, thud. The RV was small, but suddenly it felt infinite. Every wall a door to something I couldn't see. I spun in a circle, flashlight beam darting over cupboards, curtains, the narrow hall that led to the back. Shadows swayed, but nothing moved. "Stop it," I shouted, my voice cracking with terror. The knocks stopped. Silence fell heavy, thick as wet wool. For a few seconds, I almost convinced myself it was over, that maybe my mind had twisted the sounds, turned the creaks of a dying RV into something more sinister. Then, from directly above me, on the ceiling, came 3 knocks. I gasped, stumbling back. My shoulder slammed into the table, rattling the mug of blood-dark liquid I'd left untouched. It sloshed across the surface, dripping to the floor in sticky trails. Something shifted in the ceiling. I heard it, weight moving, pressing down. The roof groaned under the strain, as if something crawled on its belly across the metal, dragging itself closer to where I stood. I bolted for the driver's seat. My keys were still in the ignition, though the engine was dead. Some primal part of me hoped, prayed that turning it again might roar the machine back to life, drown out the nightmare with the sound of pistons and wheels. I twisted hard. The starter whined, weak and useless. Nothing. Just a sputter that died into silence. But in that silence, I realized I wasn't alone up front. The passenger seat was wet. At first, I thought it was just my sweat-blurred vision, but no. The fabric was darkened, soaked through, and it wasn't water. The smell told me that sickly sweet, metallic, foul. A puddle spread across the vinyl floor beneath, inching toward my boots. I staggered back, nearly tripping over myself. My flashlight swept across the dash. That's when I saw them. Handprints. Pressed into the condensation on the inside of the windshield. Not just 1 or 2. Dozens, overlapping, smeared. Some large, some small, some with fingers too long, palms too wide. They covered the glass from top to bottom, like something had pressed against it from the inside during the night, trying to get out, or trying to remind me it already was. I collapsed into the driver's seat, clutching the wheel like a lifeline. My mind spun. I'd survived so much on the road, storms, breakdowns, loneliness, but nothing had prepared me for this. My RV, my sanctuary, had turned into a coffin. And then the whisper came. At first, I thought it was the wind slipping through a crack in the door, a faint hiss, indistinct. But no, it was inside. Words, garbled and wet, leaking from the walls themselves. Marcus, my name, drawn out, drowning in static as though spoken through a throat filled with water. My blood ran cold. Every instinct screamed to run, but where could I go? The desert stretched endless, the night ready to fall. Out there I had no shelter. In here I had this. The whispers grew. More voices joined, layered, overlapping, each one rasping my name, tugging at it, twisting it. Some high, some low, all distorted. They filled the RV, leaking from vents, from the cracks around the window frames, from the very seams in the walls. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it didn't stop. The sound wasn't just in the air, it was inside my head, vibrating against my skull. Desperation drove me. I stumbled back toward the narrow hall, past the kitchen, past the bathroom, to the small storage cabinet I kept locked at the rear. My emergency kit was in there. Flares, a hatchet, a radio. Tools for survival. Tools I suddenly needed like breath itself. But when I reached the cabinet, the lock was gone. The latch dangled broken, the door hanging slightly open. Inside, the hatchet was missing, the flares too. The only thing left was the radio, old and cracked, its wire antenna bent like a snapped limb. I grabbed it anyway, twisting the knob. Static burst into the air, loud and raw. For a moment, it drowned the whispers, a wave of white noise that made my ears ring. I clung to it, pressing the radio close to my chest like it could save me. But then, beneath the static, another sound rose. Not random noise. A voice. Still walking. It hissed, buried deep in the static. Still knocking. I dropped the radio, and it cracked against the floor. The voices didn't stop. They bled out from the broken speaker, repeating those two phrases over and over, rising and falling in grotesque rhythm. Still walking. Still knocking. Still walking. Still knocking. My vision blurred. Panic constricted my chest. I backed into the bedroom, the last place I wanted to be, but there was nowhere else to go. The bed was soaked. Sheets damp, mattress sagging as though waterlogged. I pulled at the blanket and it dripped in my hands. My flashlight beam caught the floor beneath. It wasn't just wet. It rippled. Tiny pools spreading out, quivering as if something beneath the floor was breathing through them. I staggered back, smacking into the wall. That's when the knocking resumed, everywhere at once. From the floor, from the ceiling, from inside the mattress, the cupboards, the fridge. My sanctuary had become an instrument, every surface struck by invisible hands in a rhythm that built and built until it rattled my bones. "Stop!" I screamed, voice breaking. For the first time, it obeyed. The knocking ceased. The whispers silenced. The RV went utterly still. I stood there in the suffocating quiet, chest heaving, heart clawing at my ribs. My flashlight beam trembled across the room, catching nothing but warped shadows. And then, slowly, the closet door opened. The hinges shrieked, and the narrow gap widened. The smell poured out first, thick and choking. My light swept over it, and my stomach dropped. Inside, pressed against the back wall, was a figure. Pale, sagging skin stretched too thin over long bones. Eyes wide and dark, unblinking. Its head tilted as it stared at me, lips parting to reveal a mouth filled with water. Not teeth, not a tongue, just endless, bubbling water. It raised its hand, slow, deliberate. The fingers were too long, dripping, ending in nails that scraped the closet frame. And then it knocked. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound reverberated through the RV, through my chest, through the earth beneath us. My flashlight flickered, and for a split second I swore I saw more figures behind it, pressed against the closet walls, their faces overlapping, their mouths spilling water in silence. I bolted. I don't even remember the motion, just the raw animal drive to escape. My shoulder slammed the door open, sunlight blinding as I stumbled into the desert. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs threatened to collapse. The image of that figure burned into my skull. When I finally dared to look back, my RV stood quiet and still on the roadside. No face in the window, no door swinging open, just a silent box of steel and shadow. But that the footprints were back, not circling this time, leading away, dozens of them pressed fresh into the dirt, stretching out into the horizon, heading in the same direction I was, still walking, still knocking. I followed the footprints at first because I didn't know what else to do. My body was weak, my mind unraveling, but the road seemed less empty with those prints etched into the dust ahead of me. They were proof I wasn't completely alone, even if what made them wasn't something I wanted near me. The desert sun dipped low, dragging shadows long across the asphalt. My lips cracked from thirst. My head pounded with every step. I kept waiting for the prints to vanish into nothing, a mirage. But they didn't. They stayed sharp and clear, leading me farther away from the rig that had become a tomb. Somewhere between exhaustion and delirium, I realized the footprints were multiplying again. What had been one set turned into 2, then 3, then a crowd. Dozens of overlapping impressions, all bare, all long-toed, as if a silent procession had passed through just before me. The air grew damp, not cooler, still blistering hot, but wet, thick like swamp fog, even though the nearest water was miles away. The smell returned, stronger than ever. Rotting earth, stagnant water, rusted iron. It clung to the back of my throat, and I gagged with each breath. By the time night fell, I was stumbling. The moon rose thin and sharp above the horizon, casting silver across the road. That's when I heard them again. The knocks. Not distant this time. Not inside walls or beneath floors. On the road itself. A hollow drumming like fists pounding on asphalt. They echoed from every direction surrounding me. I turned in circles, flashlight beam darting across empty desert, but the sound stayed with me. Then came the whispers. My name again, carried on the wind. Marcus, drawn out, layered, dozens of voices overlapping until the air vibrated with them. Some mocked, some coaxed, some begged. My own name turned into a weapon against me. I staggered off the road, desperate, clutching at sagebrush as if it could shield me. But the prints followed. They appeared in the dirt around me, fresh and wet, circling. I was no longer following them. They were hurting me. That's when I saw the lights, faint at first, flickering on the horizon, warm, yellow, like lanterns swaying in the dark. Relief surged through me. A town. It had to be the town I'd seen on the map. Maybe I'd make it after all. I pushed myself harder, legs trembling, lungs burning. The lights grew brighter, steadier. Shapes formed, buildings, a main street, windows glowing soft and inviting. For the first time in days, I dared to believe I might be safe. But as I drew closer, my relief curdled. The town was silent. Too silent. No voices, no dogs, no engines. Just those warm yellow lights glowing in windows that revealed nothing inside. The streets were empty, yet the air buzzed with presence, the way a room feels when someone's watching you from the dark. I staggered down the main road looking for a door, a sign, anything. That's when I noticed the chairs. Every porch, every stoop, every front step had a chair placed neatly out front. Wooden rockers, plastic lawn chairs, metal folding seats, all of them facing the road. All of them empty, and on the dirt before each chair, footprints. Bare, long-toed, waiting. A chill ripped through me that no desert night should have had. I stumbled backwards, scanning the empty windows, the silent chairs. My heart thudded so loud I thought it would echo down the street. And then one by one, the lights went out. House after house, window after window, the glow vanished until the town was swallowed in black. I was left standing in the middle of the street, my flashlight beam cutting a narrow cone through the dark. The knocks resumed. From inside the houses, from beneath the porches, from the chairs themselves, a chorus of pounding, rising and falling, faster, louder, until the whole town throbbed with it. The whispers returned too, layered and suffocating. But now they weren't just saying my name. They were repeating the phrase I'd heard from the broken radio. Still walking, still knocking, still walking, still knocking. I bolted. I don't remember choosing a direction. I just ran, legs pumping on pure terror, lungs shredding in the cold air. The town blurred behind me, but the sound chased me, echoing from everywhere at once. I don't know how long I ran, hours, miles. My body became nothing but pain and emotion, until finally I collapsed. When I woke, the sun was rising. The desert was silent. No footprints, no smell, no knocks, just me sprawled on the shoulder of the road, my body shaking with exhaustion. And there, like a miracle, I saw it. A ranger's truck cresting the hill. I don't remember how I waved him down, how he helped me to the passenger seat. My throat was too raw to speak, my mind too broken to form words. He gave me water, and I drank until I nearly choked. He asked what happened, how I ended up there, but I couldn't answer. Not the truth. Not something took my RV or the town was filled with footprints and chairs. Who would believe that? All I managed was broke down, lost my way. The ranger nodded, eyes full of something I couldn't read. He drove me back toward civilization, the road stretching endless before us. For the first time in days, I felt the weight lift, slightly, just enough to breathe again. But when we passed the mile marker where my RV had been, the shoulder was empty. No rig, no tracks, no sign I'd ever been there. The ranger didn't slow down. He just muttered under his breath, so low I almost missed it. Still walking, still knocking. My blood froze. I turned to him, but he kept his eyes on the road, his face expressionless. The phrase hung heavy in the cab like it had been waiting all along. I didn't ask him to repeat it. I didn't ask him what he meant. Some answers are worse than the questions. To this day, I don't know what I survived out there. I don't know if the RV ever really broke down, or if something wanted me stranded. I don't know if that town was real, or if it was just another trap laid out in the endless desert. All I know is this. When the road is empty and the night is long, I still hear it. Knock, knock, knock. And I keep walking. Because whatever it is, whatever waits in the walls, in the towns, in the silence, it's still out there. Still walking. Still knocking.